Lori Jackson. I'll say it again, but welcome to tonight's webinar called Bringing in the Experts Will Help for Your Fundraising Goals. My name is Lori Jackson. I'm the Education Chair at the University of Memphis, AFP Collegiate Chapter, and we're so glad that you're with us tonight. If you would like, please put in the chat the name of your nonprofit, or if you're a student, identify yourself as a student or where you're located. We'd love to know who's joining us today. We have folks from across the country interested in tonight's conversation. The first thing I want to mention is that this presentation is being recorded and may be shared online. I want you to be aware of that. It'll be helpful to send this to others afterwards. Tonight, we're going to talk just a little bit about who we are, our department, our chapter, and beyond. We'll also just have a brief look at the upcoming webinars, and we'll follow up with those at the end. We'll also get an introduction of our speakers. After that, we'll have a discussion led by our speakers, and 15 minutes to go in our hour-long webinar. We will open this up for questions. So if you have questions along the way, please feel free to put those in the chat. We'll definitely circle back to those towards the end of our webinar today. Also, if you're having any technical issues, can't hear, can't see the slides, please put those in chat as well, and one of us will assist you. All right, with that, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Gillespie, Assistant Professor, University of Memphis, Department of Public and Nonprofit Administration.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I wanted to briefly talk about the AFP Collegiate Chapter, AFP standing for Association of Fundraising Professionals. It's a collegiate chapter housed within the Department of Public and Nonprofit Administration at the University of Memphis. We have a master's in public administration, a master's in nonprofit management, and graduate certificate programs. AFP as a student chapter raises funds for local nonprofit organizations. Last year, we raised $1,000 for the Hattiloo Theater. This year, 2024 spring, we will host a 3-hour concert event with food trucks and vendors to raise money for Black Seeds Urban Farms. So this is a student-led initiative, and they are hosting these webinars tonight. We appreciate that very much. And we also have the Institute for Philanthropy and Nonprofit Leadership, and we are a connected chapter to AFP Memphis. Thank you, Lori.
Okay, thank you. As I mentioned, this is the inaugural webinar for our 2023-2024 webinar series. So we hope you enjoy tonight and you join us for our future webinars. And I have heard from others that are interested in maybe participating in these or other webinars. So please contact us. Our information will be at the last slide, or you can privately chat with us. Let us know if you would like to participate as a speaker in the future. And with that, I'm turning this over to Katiana Dandridge, our president-elect for the AFP chapter, who will introduce our speakers.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for joining us. Today's speakers, first we have Ms. Kim Gaskill. She is the founding partner of Gaskill Strategy. Kim has been active in public relations and fundraising for nearly 30 years. And although more than half of her career has been spent at Gaskill Strategies, she started her career at the Metropolitan Interfaith Association, where she led a successful capital campaign to raise $25 million, coordinated with the creation and operation of the Starry Nights exhibit, a top 20 Southeastern tourism event and fundraiser, and published Memphis Parent. As Vice President of Public Affairs, Kim honed her abilities as a manager and emerged as a skilled organizational strategic thinker with an emphasis on branding, facilitation, communication, implementation, and evaluation. As Vice President of Marketing for the Cardinals AAA affiliate, Memphis Redbirds, she added sports marketing to her skill set, working to create and manage the branding of the team, the opening of AutoZone Park, and the Redbirds Foundation. Also speaking tonight, we have Anna Schlia. She is a doctoral student at the University of Rochester. Frontline fundraiser, researcher of donor inclinations, and status quo breaker, Anna Schlia is an expert in philanthropy, research, principal and major gifts, program building, and executive leadership coaching. Relentlessly inquisitive about nonprofit institutions and the donors who support them, Anna is an emerging philanthropy scholar. She is pursuing a PhD at the University of Rochester studying philanthropy for higher education. And lastly, but not least, we have Elizabeth Zeigler, the Executive Director of I Have the Right To. Elizabeth is an accomplished for-profit and nonprofit executive who emboldens leaders and teams to conquer their goals. She is a rare strategic thinker and candid communicator who thrives on developing individual capabilities and cultivating thriving workplaces. As the first woman to lead a global nonprofit management firm, Elizabeth served as a strategist, coach, and confidant to CEOs, presidents, executive directors, and board of directors around the world. Elizabeth has been published in Fast Company, The Wall Street Journal, Stanford Social Innovation Review, and MarketWatch, among others. She is also the recipient of an AFP Award for Consulting Excellence. An English and Business graduate of Muhlenberg College, Elizabeth holds a master's degree in adult education and human resource development from Fordham University and a certificate from Harvard Business School's Executive Education Program. Thank you all.
Okay. Thank you, Tatiana. At this time, we will begin our discussion, and I will stop sharing my screen so we can see our speakers here more easily. So let's start with some conversation. I will be asking a series of questions, and our speakers can join in any time, and just depending on how our conversation goes, we'll go from point to point. We're going to begin with a question on the state of nonprofit fundraising today. Obviously, there have been a lot of changes in society over the last few years. So for our presenters, can you share some key strategies that have been particularly successful post-COVID-19 and in today's world?
Well, I'll jump in.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. And I'll answer the question from a major gift perspective. And what I've seen in terms of a shift is the ability to be successful while you're inviting donors into the conversation about solving a problem. And I think many leaders want to talk about the successful aspects of their organization, and maybe reluctant to talk about what may not be working as well. And I've heard a number of donors and funders ask the question, what problems can we help you solve? What's not working well that we can help you with?
Kim, Anna?
I'll piggyback on that. I think,
Sure.
so as we're looking at, so it's funny, my bio, I can tell, I was on the staff side for quite a while. I've actually had the consulting firm for 20 years next year. My bio talked only about the staff side. So I think that's interesting. I don't know why we haven't really shared that updated side of the work, but the reality is planning, which is so much of what we do now. I think post-COVID, you cannot overplan. And as we think about it, we think about it in one way specifically. So I was a PR trained professional, and in marketing, we're taught the 4 Ps of marketing, right? So what we're seeing now is what we call the 4 Ps of philanthropy. And that is that you have to have people with a passion for your purpose. And it kind of used to stop there. And now we've added the 4th P of undergirded by a process. So if you don't have one of those 4 Ps, if you just say have a ton of high capacity people, but they're not really passionate about what you're doing, it's not going to work. So it really has to be people passionate about your purpose, undergirded by a process. So say you get them all in the room, they all want to give, but you can't get their name right. So what we're seeing is post-COVID, we saw an uptake in giving. Now it's dropping. It's dropped. Last year was the first year we've seen a decline in a while. And we have to be highly competitive for that dollar. And that's in Memphis, and that's outside of Memphis as well. We're in Memphis, but people with a passion for your purpose, undergirded by a process. And at your organization, wherever you are, you kind of have to stop and do a check of each of those 4 boxes. And how are we performing in each of those areas? And if we are weak in one, we ultimately will not sustain that giving.
I think that's very interesting, particularly the process point, because I think sometimes nonprofits don't plan ahead to be replaced. It's got passionate people today, but those passionate people have lives and may need to be replaced, and there's no throughput there. Kim,
Lori,
anything else on that? Sure.
Yeah, I'll add some national trends, maybe for all gift sizes. First is the overwhelming increase in gifts made online, and gifts that aren't directly solicited that are made online. We're paying attention to that. The huge surge of donor advised fund gifts and how much of our philanthropy as a nation is going into donor advised funds and then sitting in donor advised funds. So we're thinking of this money that we say, oh, look at our nation, aren't we philanthropic? But it is not seeping into our organizations. Some organizations are doing great with soliciting, getting that donor advised fund money, but otherwise it's just a big factor right now. And then also I would say more of an openness towards non-traditional, what we might consider non-traditional nonprofits. One article that really struck me during a hurricane last year was that NPR put out a recommendation for how you can help with this hurricane. And none of the nonprofits that they mentioned were household names that we would have known. They didn't mention American Red Cross. They didn't mention these large nonprofits, but they did mention mutual aid organizations. So we're seeing sort of these different forms of philanthropy, I would say, starting to trend a bit.
That's very interesting as well. I think a lot of the corporations have moved away from the day of giving and more towards sort of individually focused. What do each of the employees want to do? And I wonder if that brings to light and benefits some of these smaller ones you're mentioning that might not be the household names of Red Cross and United Way and things like that. Kim, when you mentioned online giving, do you see trends nationally for how that impacts the size of the gift, or who gives, the age of giving? Is there anything we can see from that?
Yes, and Dr. Gillespie is aware and brought me aware to so much work that is centered on women and giving online, that women are so much more likely to give online. If I were to guess, I would say that's based on our women's relational approach to philanthropy, and that if your girlfriend is putting up a Facebook solicitation for her birthday, or if there's an organization that you want to represent and have other people give to using our networks, that is one trend in online giving.
Okay. And I guess I go back to Elizabeth as a question there, since you mentioned major giving, I believe. I think of online giving and major giving as sort of difficult to connect the dots, that major donors with major gifts really need more hand holding and more customized. But have you found that to be the case, or is there anything to glean there?
Well, I think traditionally that's true. And our organization today received a $5,000 gift online, which got my attention when that came through this morning. Frankly, from someone that was not known to us before today. And so, being able to think about following up and reaching out and understanding what motivated that person to make that gift and then keep them involved going forward. So I think it is often hard to connect those dots, but more and more we're seeing people make larger gifts online.
Interesting. And it's wonderful that you're following up and finding out the motivation there, because there may be opportunity to foster that.
Yeah.
For any of you, what advice would you give to nonprofit organizations? And again, thank you to those who have put in the chat the nonprofit that you represent. For those that joined a little later, we invite you to put, if you're a student, in which program you might be a student of, if you're with an organization, or if you're located in Memphis or outside of Memphis. But what advice would you give to nonprofit organizations looking to diversify these sources of funds? And we've talked a little bit about those today, but who would like to join in?
I'll jump in. I think that it's really important to understand your audience. So, for example, we just talked about the $5,000 giver. That's probably an individual, I would imagine. So that individual is going to want and demand different types of communication than, say, perhaps a corporation or a foundation. And just delivering the solicitation can be very different as well. So you've got to learn how to adjust how you talk to these different audiences and be really clear on who they are. Also, this kind of piggybacks to a minute ago about major gifts. I think nationally, larger organizations think about major gifts in that 10,000 and up range. We often work with organizations and we advise them to think about a major gift. For one organization, it might be $500. It might be $1,000 to $10,000. So again, that's back to understanding your audience. It might not just be diversifying the source, but diversifying the size of the gift and understanding for your organization what that looks like and what those benefits and key points need to be as you reach out and build those relationships. And I would say too that people are testing you. So we see older generation like 60 plus, they gave to maybe 10 to 12 organizations and still do. Younger, that middle age, Gen X, even younger, they're giving to fewer organizations. So someone sending you that $10, even $50 gift is probably sending someone else a gift of $50 or maybe the 5,000. And if you do a better job at stewardship, you're going to perhaps retain that donor or move that donor up in their donor journey along to a higher gift or a different entry point. So I think just remembering who you're talking to as you're diversifying, it's not a one size fits all approach. You've got to really know who you're talking to.
I find that very interesting because when we think of, as you said, the donor that's giving $10 here and $5 there, and you're talking about stewarding and leveling them up, my thought was, does the trend among some to broaden how they donate, does that keep them pocket wise from donating in depth? Do we find that they're not going to give a larger donate because in their mind that's, well, I have donated. I donate to lots of things, not one thing to significant certain charities, nonprofits. Anna, did you want to chime in there at all, or any thoughts?
Oh, sure. On the diversification question, there was some interesting research that came out last year on nonprofits and diversification. And I think that sometimes we run the risk of thinking of our how we run a nonprofit similar to how we might run our own personal accounts. If there's one area of funding that's working really well for you, go for it. There's no need to have 30% from foundations, 30% from corporate. I mean, that's just, this isn't your portfolio. This isn't your own personal portfolio. And that with that being said, I see a lot of nonprofits getting so caught up with foundation work and grants work. And it just kills me. And this is my bias as a dyed-in-the-wool fundraiser, frontline individual fundraiser. And that is 73% of all giving comes from individuals. So while it's really easy to say, oh, there's a foundation and they put out this RFP, but the amount of time it takes to put together that RFP and write up that report every 6 months, man, you could talk to so many donors in that short period of time. So the other piece to that then is the first two mechanisms for giving, research-based, Beckers and Wiepking, is donors need to know that you are a nonprofit. They need to know an awareness of need, and they need to be asked. So I would say asking individuals for what you need and not focusing too much on diversification is my advice.
Amen to that. And I would add that when you think about asking individuals, if that's really where the diversification can happen, each time you ask for a gift, you could ask for a connection to somebody else.
And I would add that you'll see foundations last year took an uptick in giving. I think that's personally donor advised funds. So people are parking their money there, and that's showing that foundation line higher, but it's still individual giving. So the individual is who you're wanting.
At the end of the day. Okay, absolutely. Another question. What are some common mistakes that nonprofits make when it comes to fundraising, and how can they avoid them? A big one.
I have a feeling we could all jump in here, right? I would say not having a financial goal. I know that seems so obvious, but I can't tell you how many people we work with, and they may have a board member or an ED that says, we just need to raise X number of dollars. We do a lot of campaigns. And so what is your financial goal? Why do you need it? What's the rationale behind it? And what's the forecasting that supports it? So, and I would say, I hate to say, but probably 3 out of 5 don't always have those answers. So really, what's the urgent need that you need a donor to help you fill? And can you prove that rationale behind it financially?
And then I would add, not making any assumptions and listening to your donors, because so many times either development professionals or executive directors are thinking about their needs, which are real. And I agree with everything you said, Kim. And we want to, especially at the major gift level, we want to be listening to what our donors care about and what inspires them, and find the intersection of our organization's needs and their interests in their philanthropy.
And my thought comes directly from the advice of my mentor, Elizabeth Zeigler, who talked so much about growth mindset. And I think it just shaped for me this positive attitude and excited attitude about the work that we do, and the attitude that we need to bring to our work every day. And also know that there aren't limited charitable dollars out there. I want my donors to be giving to 10 organizations in town, because that tells me so much about them. That tells me that they're philanthropic. It tells me how often that they give. I want the person out there that's the overachiever philanthropic to be on my side. And then I'm going to move my organization up the list for them. So I think having that attitude towards fundraising, that this is work that we are so lucky to do, that this is so much about getting to know people and getting out there and making the damn phone call, and knowing that we bring that attitude to our organizations. I think that that's what I see people mess up. I see people get tripped up by being afraid of this work, speaking about it in negative terms. If I hear you say low-hanging fruit or watch your wallet, we just don't talk about our profession that way.
No.
This profession is a vocation. This is like a joy. Look at the amazing work we get to do. So I would say I see people get caught up there.
Yeah, and I would add to that, I think philanthropy is powerful and transformative. Like, I really believe in philanthropy. And I also think we don't always, as organizations, I see organizations not giving credit back to that donor. They speak of it not in you are doing this, but it's we. We're great. We're great at this.
Good
And
point.
it's shifting that language that's really important, because we wouldn't exist without donors. Literally, for the most part, unless we have strong earned revenue, we would not exist without donors. So giving that credit back to them is so important.
Excellent. I love the idea of being passionate and sharing the purpose and making it inclusive, so that your success is due to the donor's success. In today's competitive fundraising landscape, how can nonprofits stand out and differentiate themselves? And several people who have put in chat here, they're members of smaller to medium-sized nonprofits, if that helps sort of in context of who we have in the audience today.
Well, I'll pick up on a point that Kim made, which is really understand your purpose. And Anna knows I love Simon Sinek, so I always talk about what's your why. And in other words, you can't be all things to all people, and you'll differentiate yourself by focusing on what you do best.
And I think
Absolutely.
as you do that, I would jump in and say thank you, and say it in a personal way. There are so many folks who send out that generated electronic thank you, and then there's a generated letter with the signature dropped in from the development officer. As development officers, we're really important, but I think the CEO or that front person needs to say thank you also, and a personal signature, and a little note that just says thank you on top of the letter. Particularly for a small organization, bring a volunteer in get permission to forge the CEO's signature. Sorry to say. But
Right.
seriously, with permission, help that CEO engage in a very personal way, whatever that might look like. And so often we just don't do that. It becomes too automatic. I think our world's tried to be so automatic that we're losing that personal touch, and we can add that back.
Excellent point.
I would say
Mhm.
there's research by Noah Dresner. It's a concept called philanthropic mirroring. And it's that a donor's identity very much shapes what they support and who they support. And that it's important as we are soliciting and stewarding and engaging in fundraising work that we are always considering the beneficiary as part of the conversation, that we are representing the beneficiary, we are representing the organization, but we're really representing this individual or this group, this family or this neighborhood, whoever the beneficiary is, and that beneficiary is part of our conversation. So what Noah Dresner's work says is that if your donor can see themselves in the beneficiary, if you can shorten the distance between that identity, if the donor really can connect with who that beneficiary is, then they're more likely to give and to give more. And what that means is not just race, not just gender, but looking at all of the intersections and looking at maybe the impact that the donor wants to have. Do they care about this neighborhood in Memphis? Do they care about this cause or issue? Do they just care about your executive director and they're going to give wherever your executive director is, right? So I think it's understanding the donor's motivation and also remembering the beneficiary's role in the process of charitable giving. Because one more bit of research is this charitable triad theory, which states it really doesn't matter how much money the donor has and how philanthropic they are. It really doesn't matter how great that nonprofit is and that fundraiser is the best fundraiser in the world. It really doesn't matter if the beneficiary is totally worthy and is from an amazing organization. What matters is the relationship between all three. So our job as fundraisers is to connect all three, the donor, the beneficiary, and then our job as the fundraiser. So I think keeping that beneficiary in focus and knowing that the donor needs to see themselves in the beneficiary.
That's wonderful. That's great advice. Can you describe the importance or discuss the importance of donor stewardship? We've been talking about this, sort of fostering that long-term relationship with the donor and raising their giving, and how nonprofits can build long-lasting relationships with their supporters, and particularly in this digital world we're talking about, the automated world.
So in the work that I've done and thinking about the organization that I'm representing this evening, it's a younger organization. It's a small, for those of you who are listening, I can count on one hand how many staff members we have, and yet we have a national presence, and we work around the country. But thinking about the importance of donor stewardship as we are growing our base of donors is so critical. And so last year we may have had someone making $100 gift, and because of the communication that we're sending them, they're making $1,000 gift this year, or $1,000 donor last year is now sending $2,500. And that wouldn't happen without the communication that we send. And as Kim said, in addition to personalized thank yous, also telling the story of impact. And I love what Anna just said about the beneficiary and keeping that in central focus. And as you were talking, Anna, I could think about a couple of places that I've worked with in the past where I hadn't really thought about it at the time, but now that I do, where the donor definitely saw themselves as the as the beneficiary, or they were that person at one point in their life. So telling the story of impact is what will inspire people and give people the confidence to climb the ladder, so to speak, of giving levels.
And I would add to that, when you think about the donor cycle, think about it just like at the face of a clock. So we focus so much on solicitation. And if you really think about the clock, the solicitation happens maybe between 5 and 6, sometimes between 5 and 7, but really it's, so when you start at 12, all of that research, who am I? Why are you targeting me? How do I behave? What connects me to that beneficiary? So research and then engaging me, then asking me, then thanking me and stewarding me. And it starts all over again. So I think as fundraisers, it's easy to fall into a trap of, and particularly in a small shop too, of just the asking, because you're trying to figure out how to fill in all the other hours. And I would say turn to volunteers, turn to participants, let your board members do thankathons, write notes. There's a ton of ways to engage. Extend your team. I worked in a very small shop here and had to learn quickly how to use peers and volunteers and other staff members to be an extension of my team. So I would think about it that way.
That's a great point. Again, oh, sorry, Anna.
Corey, I'm just getting real good at cutting you off.
It's okay. No, go
No,
for it.
it's not. I'm sorry.
No problem. No, just that we have smaller organizations, as I mentioned. So extending the reach of a team and thinking of your informal team sounds key. Anna, go for it.
No, it's if you have 1 or 2 donors that are your top people and you write their name on a Post-it, congratulations, you have a major gift program, however you define major gift. So if those 2 are your donors that you're just going to think a lot about, you're going to spend time thinking about and asking questions like, who is the right person to reach out to them? And what kind of stewardship do they want? Do they want it to be big and showy? Do they want to make sure that their peers know? Do they want to make sure their family knows? Getting to people right before Thanksgiving with something to brag about is one of my favorite strategies. They're going to be around their family. And when the family says, what are you up to? You want to make sure that they say, you know what? I just had a great report from a nonprofit I support, right? We all brag a little bit. So maybe that's the best way to steward them. Maybe they really don't want to hear, they don't want a big party, or they'd love to hear from a beneficiary in a nice little note. So it's about stopping and considering, not for everybody, but for those really important donors, to think about what type of stewardship is meaningful to them. And it's never, never, never inappropriate to ask. I think we get so caught up and worried about what people are going to say, but I love being able to say, how would you like to be thanked for this gift? This is so fantastic. You are so generous to us. Isn't it wonderful? You can't say all that if they're only given $5, by the way. You're not allowed to use the word phenomenal unless it's, a phenomenal gift to you. But after you're done saying that, we would love to thank you. How do you want to be thanked? And they might say, no, no, no. But listen to the answer, or listen to what they think, because if you can get that right, if you can align with their motivation for giving, then you're aligning with their next solicitation.
One of the things, I appreciate that. One of the things that I'm hearing from folks is we have the advantage of automation now and online giving, which has been transformative, but sometimes we're missing that community and personal piece. And Kim, you spoke so well about this, about handwritten thank you notes. I mean, how many of us receive written letters, written postcards? How many of us get on the phone and actually talk to someone versus email versus? So what are ways that you're finding nonprofits are successful with building community and rapport with people to augment the automated piece of the fundraising process?
I mean, I'll jump in. We've done some, we do, and from a major gifts perspective, I'm a big believer in a giving device that's branded for the organization, that tells you what it's doing. So, it might be named in a way that you immediately understand how your gift is helping. And then it's peer driven. So peer-to-peer fundraising. So you might have a small host group that's stepping out and asking for gifts. You might equip them with letters and notes. Sometimes there's house gatherings, parties. But we're finding right now too that everything went to Zoom for several years almost. And now people are really wanting to be back in person.
Exactly.
We are seeing people. We had a ribbon cutting Friday for a place that was opening up, and probably 300 folks. And the beauty of that was it was a veterans organization. So there were veterans in the room. politicians in the room, donors in the room, board members in the room. So I also think that when you can bring everyone together and they feel part of a bigger cause than themselves, that's really helpful. So however you can recreate that. And don't forget about your newsletters. Don't forget about sharing that information back out, pushing it out, even a simple email thank you with a dropping that photo in there from the ribbon cutting. So just communicating back what's happened. Don't assume they saw it also, because it takes us we're bombarded with messages. So, you don't want to offend someone with too many pieces of communication, but it takes more than once to get someone's attention, at least 3 times for it to actually sink in.
Anna or Elizabeth, want to jump in on that?
I think about the Bible verse sometimes, for where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, I am there. If it's good enough for Jesus, it can be good enough for our nonprofits. Keep it small, create community in a small way. I think having 3 people to lunch who oh, you know what? They are supporting us for this reason, and this one is really enthusiastic, and this one is a great leader, and I think they know each other, but I'm not sure. I'll check. 2 or 3. And this is, again, going on my Post-it note, major gift program theory. And that's all it takes. It takes doing that a few times, but to think of creating community, I know for me, that feels huge. That feels like there's a balloon arch involved. And what I'm saying is
right.
there doesn't have to be a balloon arch. There maybe can just be coffee. Hey, there's some other people that support our work, and I think you would love to meet them. You guys have a lot in common. I'd love the chance to introduce you. And just start by creating community there. That group will get bigger.
The good part about that too is that there may be some indirect tangential projects that those 3 people in that coffee that are unrelated to your nonprofit, but you provided value to these major donors, who then in turn remember fondly, hey, we connected. Where did we connect? We connected when Anna brought us together about this nonprofit. So it sort of snowballs on itself. Anna, you also mentioned the holidays, and we are right here at Thanksgiving, and we're all here at the end of the year. Have you seen end of the year giving changing, or are there best practices now in whatever world we're in for these next 6 weeks, 5 weeks, something like that? Oh my.
Yeah, so as cynical as I am about a lot of the work that we do, especially since I've been on the studying our work side, I'm not as close to it as I was a year ago. I have some new opinions about the work we do. It's all very grumpy. But one of the things that I'm looking at when we look at giving season, I kind of hesitate to promote giving season. I think every damn day is giving season. But we do know a lot of people make gifts right around this time. We do know that Giving Tuesday has had tremendous success, and that we also know that Giving Tuesday works. And that if you're of the camp that thinks, well, our donors get enough information that day, we're not going to bug them, I advise against that. I say you deserve to be in your donor's email box the same exact way the United Way does, the same way the Humane Society does. Go for it. Be at the table, be right there, so that when people are thinking about making their gifts that day, they add your organization onto the list. I know a lot of families make giving decisions around Thanksgiving. I always made it a point to get my proposals out this week or early next week, or at least be dropping an email Monday of Tuesday of next week of everybody you care about. Hope you have a great time with your family. Here's, PS, here's a little information that's happening at our organization, so that you're getting in their brain as they might have a chance to relax for a minute.
Absolutely. What a good reminder on timing. Kim or Elizabeth, anything to chime in on this time of year?
I wouldn't add anything to what Anna said. I can tell you that this afternoon I had a conversation with the founders of our organization, and Anna can tell me if this is a mistake. They said, we're participating in Giving Tuesday, so we will have a Giving Tuesday campaign. And then other than that, they're looking to use Valentine's Day as a theme and talking about from their hearts as founders how grateful they are for donors, and that there will be some asking around Valentine's Day.
Yeah, interesting. Obviously, trying to stand out and trying to keep top of mind throughout the year for sure. One of the things you said earlier, Anna, about donor and beneficiary and closing that gap. Again, looking at those that are joining us and thinking of the broad range of nonprofits out there. There are some nonprofits whose mission is really clear, as in providing food in food deserts. That is a really concrete thing for us to see. And as human beings, if it's concrete, we can see it, we taste it, touch it, it makes sense. But there are other nonprofits that do wonderful work, but their missions are more abstract, still equally important. But I think it makes it more challenging to message to potential donors and level up when it is not something so concrete as coats for those who don't have coats and food, et cetera. So how do you advise nonprofits as they're thinking about helping a donor identify with the beneficiary, with the programming, when it's not something so concrete?
I would, my gut reaction there is twofold. The first is any way to tell stories with individuals in them. We've got this great new tool called ChatGPT that can help you out with that if you're scared to write a story. You just put in a few prompts and get started that way. Get a draft going for yourself. So if you're able to tell a story, I think that's a great way to start. The second is a lesson I learned in stand-up comedy. I was a stand-up comic for a number of years, 8 years in Chicago and here in Western New York. And one of the bits of information that was passed around in comedy circles was trust that your audience will get the joke. The worst thing you can do as a stand-up comic is over-explain your joke. So while you might say, or your board might have a worry, oh no, our mission is too complex, I would say, trust that your donors are with you. Trust that your audience out there is with you. And if there's a way for you to tell the story of what you do in a compelling and individual way, they're gonna meet you there. The right people will meet you there. Not everything, thank you TikTok, but not everything has to be 30 seconds and bite-sized form.
Very good point.
One thing we like to encourage too is to choose, a theme might be too strong a word, but choose some storyline or messaging that you're going to apply to all platforms. So if I see it in my mailbox, I see it in my inbox, I see it when the donor calls and the board member calls and thanks me, they're all using similar language, because we want it to be consistent across all of the platforms, and not just one time of year either. We do focus so much on year end, but we usually see an uptick in June in that end of the fiscal year. Valentine's Day is becoming big now. So thinking about it, calendaring it out. So we work, one of the things we do immediately is say, okay, what are the things we need to do this year? And what does the calendar look like that helps us achieve it? When are we mailing? What's the message? And how do we ensure that it's consistent across the year and throughout all platforms? And then you can train your board members on that as well, right? So everyone, we talk about how do we build a culture of philanthropy internally. We bring everyone together with cupcakes and talk to, your whole team, program side, administrative side, and say, this is what we're talking about this year. Help us tell this story. So it's enlisting everyone with a common message.
I love the idea of, thank you for sharing that, of planning ahead for the year. It seems like so many times in small, understaffed, Elizabeth, you said you were a very small team, nonprofits were reacting to the situation and adapting certainly, but we also have to be as strategic as possible. So how have you, or how do you advise nonprofits to plan ahead, how far to plan ahead? And Elizabeth, if I could ask you to chime in on that one.
Well, if my founders listen to this recording, I apologize in advance. what I've found with founders, and whether it's with the organization that I'm with right now or organizations that I've advised, is that founders are creative and visionary, and there's no short, what do you call it? What's the phrase? We're never short of new ideas. And so the role that I play sometimes is to remind, let's plan. Here are our messages, here are our themes. We'll leave room for flexibility and agility, but I'm going to be the voice that reminds you when I feel like we're deviating from the message or the plan. And consistency is so important to donors. I tell our founders that you're sick of hearing what you've been saying, but they need to hear it, what is it, 7 times before it really is absorbed into their consciousness. And so we can't jump too quickly from one message to another, or we're risking people not really understanding what we're communicating. And so I become that annoying voice of reason. So that's something to keep in mind as well. So by the time we're tired of saying something, people are just barely absorbing it.
Well, I think that's very interesting. And when I think of the teams that might be represented on this call or listening to this recording later, it's really important to have differing personality styles, leadership styles, between founders and the leadership and day-to-day folks, and the realists, the visionaries, the nuts and bolts of all that as well. I just want to ask another question or two, and then we'll open up for questions from our attendees today. What are some best practices for measuring and communicating the impact of contributions in an effort to build trust and loyalty? So are there creative ways? Are there really these concrete ways? I think some of our discussion has already circled on this, but how to communicate the impact of contributions?
Well, I'll pick up where I just left off. Similarly, when you think about planning for the year and you think about themes, what will you measure during the year? And hopefully you're measuring, you have certain metrics that don't change from year to year, but there might be metrics that you decide to add without adding too many. And in other words, you don't want to get to the end of the year and then work on, say, an impact report. And for us last year, report sounds like a big word. It was an email blast that talked about the impact that this small but mighty organization had during the year. And I was, again, the voice of reason, saying, what are we actually going to measure? Because I don't want to get to the point where we're thinking about an impact report or a newsletter, and then we're deciding what we're measuring, right? And then we have to go back and retrace our steps. So it's important to also think about that in advance.
And Elizabeth, part of that reporting, do you balance quantitative versus qualitative? As Anna was talking about the stories, having some stories versus just the hard numbers.
Absolutely. And we all know that there are some people that gravitate to the data, and there's some people that gravitate to the stories, and you can have the hybrid kind of donor in there as well. And so it's important to think about both ends of that if it's a spectrum.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Kim and Anna, thoughts on sharing contribution impact? Okay. All right. Kim?
I would just say, this is from a small shop perspective. Oftentimes we feel like we have to measure economic impact or social impact, and we don't have the partnerships or the tools to do that necessarily. One, seek partnerships to help you tell that story. And two, sometimes measuring input and output is okay, right? So you're measuring the number of volunteers who came together to work on this mission, or the number of hours they contributed, or the number of dollars they saved you because they showed up and did X service, right? So don't be afraid to measure what you can measure. Don't not measure because you think you're not measuring well enough. So that seems sort of obvious, but if you think about your logic model and how you deliver your services, what are those required inputs, and measure those? And, it may be that 5,000 people showed up for a walk. And because of that, they told the story to one other person, which reached then 10,000 people. Just thinking of the creative ways to measure impact. And I think Elizabeth's exactly right. You can't do that on the back end. You
And
sit down and say, what are we doing?
I'll give you one concrete example, because one of our 3 organizational priorities is to provide programming to schools. And in advance of a program, we'll ask a school to administer a survey to their students. And then following the program, they administer the same survey. And so we look at the differences in the responses. And did you learn anything today? Has your opinion changed today? Will be some of the follow-up questions. And so that's one way that we are measuring. We're not going to publish it in a journal, because I'll have to go to Anna to find out exactly how to administer that. But to anecdotally say that, 75% of the students learned something or changed their opinion based on what they learned as a result of our program.
Both of you are pointing to what I would say is authenticity and continued messaging about your nonprofit. The types of data you're measuring tell more of the story, right? Well, this is important to us versus another nonprofit's going to be measuring some completely different thing, because that isn't what's important to them as well.
Right.
One last question. Sorry, Anna, go for it.
One more.
Yes.
If there were a biometric screening of the health of a nonprofit fundraising program,
Sure.
like the blood pressure reading for me is going to be donor retention.
Mm-hmm.
If you've done your job well the year before, if you have stewarded, if you have engaged your donors and more of them are coming back and supporting you, that shows me you're doing a lot of things right. And it's a metric we just don't talk about because not a lot of us are good at it. So we sort of dance around it. It's rarely gonna be the top line when you're meeting with your board, but it should be.
A great point.
Absolutely. Okay, last question, then we're going to do some questions here. I was at a very busy time in my life. Someone, a leader, came up to me and said, what can we take off your plate in order for you to stay focused? So if the nonprofits on this call could ask each of you, what is less important for me to do right now if I am overwhelmed, understaffed, and trying to fundraise? What do I not have to focus on? Tough question.
My goodness, that is such a good question. And I'm my mind is sort of exploding because I'm thinking about it from the role that I'm in as an executive director of a small nonprofit versus
Right.
years and years that I was a
Right.
consultant, and I would have told people drop the following immediately. And the answer may be different for each leader, whether you're a development professional or an executive director or communications. And so for me, I used to work with someone who said, I'm a fan of ruthless prioritization. And I said, I love that phrase. Tell me what it means. And that person said, if I have one priority or 2 priorities for this week, month, quarter, whatever it is, that's what I have to focus on. And I have to let other people focus on the rest, or I have to decide what I'm not focusing on at all. And to each person, that might be different. But for someone like me, and again, if our founders are listening, I apologize. If I think about how we're going to grow the reach of our organization, it's by reaching more schools. It's by reaching more students. It's by reaching more parents associations. And that may be then the social media may not be a top priority for me, but the outreach to the schools will be. Or if we have a certain fundraising target that we need to hit, and there might be a competing priority, I might have to say, I can't do that, because if I focus on that, I am not going to make my target in fundraising. And at the end of the day or the end of the year, what are you measuring me against or on. And that's where I need to keep my focus. And that's where it might seem, quote unquote, ruthless, because I'm saying no to things that we'd like to say yes to.
That's right. Yeah. Anna or Kim, anything on that before we go to questions?
I'll just say quickly, so many things look and smell like fundraising, but they're not fundraising.
Oh,
Thank you,
okay.
Anna.
So the ruthless part is great advice, and it requires that awareness to say, okay, they want me to go out with them. We're going to meet these 3 people. Oh, this looks like a great invitation. Maybe we'll talk up the wait. Step back. Is that
Right.
fundraising? Is that fundraising work? And all of my other comparison is, you can't, I think about losing weight a lot and fundraising a lot. So a lot of my metaphors are about losing weight and drinking water and fundraising. And like, you just can't fix your problems in one day a month. So when I see executive directors that say, oh, I block off the 15th of every month for fundraising, like, no, you need to
Right.
block off 15
Right.
minutes a day, and you need to make a phone call every day. If you are
Wow.
responsible for fundraising for your organization, you are ethically responsible for fundraising for your organization. And I hate saying this, but you got to make a phone call a day. Like, you have to be reaching out to donors with that level of consistency.
Excellent. Kim.
I'm tough when I'm not doing it. Huh?
Kim, any thoughts on that? We're going to pivot to our last slides here as well.
You know your goals, do those things that move you closer toward your goals. So if you have a major gifts program and you need to raise X number of dollars, social media, putting everything out on Instagram may not move you closer to your goal. It might be really great ultimately, but it's not moving you closer to your goal. I would also say, know yourself. I'm not great in a database. I always needed a good partner, good in a database, right? I needed to know what's in there. I knew what the questions to ask, but it was not me in that database. So finding what you're really good at and being willing to delegate. And if you're in a small shop, you may not have someone to delegate to. So you do have to figure out how to work around that. And I would say workarounds, right? So sometimes you have to do the data because there's no one to delegate to, but really understanding your strengths and weaknesses helps you make those choices too.
That's a great example.
Peter Drucker, do what you do best, pay others to do the rest.
That's right. Or find a volunteer.
That's right. Yeah. More importantly, find a volunteer.
Find a volunteer.
Sure. Well, I'm looking all of a sudden looking for my my slides here as we wrap up today. Folks, if we have any questions, please put those in the chat. We are going to wrap up. Does everyone see my slide? I should have my slide up. Folks, can you hear me? I apologize.
Yes.
Okay, great. Sorry about that. Multiple monitors, it happens. So you should see currently a slide of our upcoming webinars. We do hope that folks will join us for those. If people have any questions, feel free to put those in the chat. But you can also contact us, our chapter, be involved with our chapter, support our chapter's efforts. We'll have a spring event announced shortly. But if anyone has questions, we'd appreciate hearing from you. But otherwise, it's been a delight having our speakers here tonight with us. We really thank you for your expertise. Dr. Gillespie, Katiana, do you have anything you'd like to say at this time?
Yes, Lori, sorry, I can't see your slides, so.
Okay, thank you.
I would just like to say I learned so much, and I teach fundraising. So I appreciate the 3 of you and all the wisdom and insight that you brought to this conversation. And people are in the chat are asking, will we share this? We'll definitely share this, because all the nuggets of wisdom that were dropped are too important not to share.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you once again for participating. And here are the links if anyone would like those. We appreciate your time tonight and look forward to seeing everyone in our upcoming webinars.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Take care.